The lobby of the Grand Avalon Hotel glowed with golden light, spilling from chandeliers the size of small cars. Paparazzi flashes stung the air outside, bouncing off black SUVs as they pulled up one by one. This wasn't just another Hollywood charity gala. This was the gala, the one where every A-lister made an appearance if they wanted to stay relevant. Keanu Reeves arrived without the usual fanfare. No personal PR team swarming around him. No oversized entourage. Just him in a charcoal suit, slightly rumpled as if he'd worn it before. His hair loosely tied back, a subtle nod to his dislike for pretense. He slipped past the cameras almost unnoticed, his security detail keeping a low profile. Backstage, the world was quieter. The scent of fresh-cut flowers mixed with the metallic tang of stage rigging and hot lights. Staff in headsets rushed past with clipboards, murmuring cues and last-minute changes. And in the corner, an audio tech was fiddling with a wireless lavalier microphone, motioning for Keanu to step over so they could get him ready for his speech later in the evening. The mic was clipped to his lapel, a small, almost invisible dot of black plastic. The tech, distracted by a supervisor barking orders, flipped the transmitter switch without double-checking the audio channel. A careless move in the rush of live production. The little red light blinked twice, then stayed steady alive. Keanu didn't notice. He gave the tech a small smile and a nod before stepping away, adjusting his jacket. That's when two stagehands passed behind him, their voices low but urgent. "Poor kid," one said, shaking his head. "He's only 12, first big break." And she tore into him like he was garbage. The other replied, "Yeah, she called him useless. Said he ruined her opening bit. He's in the dressing room crying." Their words cut through the background chatter like a cold wind. Keanu's brow furrowed, his head tilting slightly as if tuning in more carefully. He didn't know who they were talking about yet, but his instincts told him this wasn't just backstage gossip. This was something ugly. And in his world, ugly things had a way of hiding in plain sight until someone decided to shine a light. He moved toward the wings of the stage, pausing beside a rack of costumes waiting to be brought out for the musical number. The muffled thump of bass from the opening act leaked through the heavy curtains. From here, he could see a slice of the ballroom. Tables set with crystal glasses, people in designer gowns leaning close to each other, smiling for photos. He also saw the celebrity host of the night, a woman known for her quick wit and sharp tongue, standing just off stage with her script in hand. Even at a distance, her expression carried the smug satisfaction of someone who controlled the room. Keanu didn't confront her yet. Instead, he turned to a nearby lighting technician and asked quietly, "That kid, what happened?" The man hesitated, then sighed, glancing over his shoulder before answering. "She lit into him during rehearsal, called him a prop, said if he couldn't get his lines perfect, she'd have him replaced before the next act." Keanu's jaw tightened. His mind flashed back to other moments in his career. Younger co-stars broken by cruel words, talented people crushed before they'd even had a chance to stand. What he didn't know was that every word he was about to say next would be picked up, recorded, and carried far beyond the walls of the Grand Avalon. In the control room, the live feed was rolling, and the world was about to hear a side of Keanu Reeves that rarely made it past Hollywood's polished surface. Keanu stayed in the shadow of the curtains, letting the ambient noise of the event cover his movements. From his vantage point, he could see the audience laughing at the host's opening monologue, unaware of what had happened just an hour earlier. The lighting rig above hummed, the faint smell of hot bulbs mixing with a floral scent drifting in from the banquet tables. He spotted a small boy, no older than 12, standing alone by a wardrobe rack, still in his costume, eyes red and swollen. A stagehand gently patted his shoulder before being called away, leaving him there like an abandoned prop. Keanu's steps toward the boy were slow, measured, but his eyes were locked on him. "Hey," he said softly when he reached him, lowering his voice so it didn't carry over the backstage din. "You did great out there in rehearsal." The boy shook his head without looking up. "She said I'm wasting everyone's time." The words were flat, recited as if he'd been told them more than once. Keanu crouched to meet his gaze. "You're not wasting anyone's time, especially not mine." It was a simple statement, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that came from a man who had spent decades refusing to play Hollywood's cruel games. A nearby crew member glanced over nervously, as if afraid the conversation might be overheard. "You should be careful," he murmured to Keanu when the boy stepped away to fix his costume. "She doesn't like people questioning her." Keanu gave a small, humorless smile. "She doesn't have to like it." He leaned casually against a prop crate, speaking more to himself than to anyone in particular. "I've been around this industry long enough to know. When you let someone like that treat people badly, it never stops. Gets worse, especially when it's kids. They're not props. They're not tools for a joke." He didn't realize that the wireless mic clipped to his lapel was still transmitting his every word, his voice feeding directly into the production control room. There, a junior audio engineer froze mid-adjustment, recognizing the gravity of what was being said. Normally, someone would mute an offstage mic, but in the flurry of the live broadcast, it hadn't happened. And now, Keanu's calm but unflinching words were being captured in crystal clarity. As Keanu continued speaking, his tone sharpened, the edges of frustration creeping in. "I've seen careers ruined before they even start. I've seen kids pushed until they break. Also, someone can get a cheap laugh or a cleaner shot. And every time the people in charge tell you to keep it professional, which is just code for stay quiet." His gaze drifted toward the host again, visible through the narrow slit in the curtains as she soaked in the applause. "But silence doesn't fix anything. Silence just makes you part of the problem." He wasn't raising his voice, but the control room monitors made his words sound like they were being spoken directly into the living rooms of every viewer watching the gala livestream. A producer, realizing what was happening, motioned frantically to cut the feed, but it was too late. Somewhere in the ballroom, a journalist had already started recording the live broadcast on their phone. Keanu Reeves was about to become the story of the night, and he still had no idea the world was listening. Keanu shifted his stance, glancing toward the boy one last time before speaking again, not to anyone in particular, but to the small cluster of crew members lingering nearby. His voice was steady, almost conversational, but every syllable carried the quiet gravity of someone who had seen too much to stay silent. "This isn't the first time she's done this," he said, nodding toward the host without naming her. "I remember a charity event a few years ago. Different stage, different kids, same pattern. She humiliated him in front of everyone, then laughed it off like it was part of the show." A lighting tech lowered his head, clearly knowing exactly which incident Keanu meant. "You know what happened to that boy. He quit acting, packed it up before he turned 15. And now, this one's next on her list." His voice softened, but there was steel under it. "You don't get to take someone's dream just because you think you're untouchable." In the control room, the atmosphere was pure chaos. A director barked into his headset, "Cut his mic. Cut it now." But the feed operator hesitated, not because of technical issues, but because they were listening. What Keanu was saying wasn't some drunken rant or empty Hollywood gossip. It was a raw, unfiltered indictment of an industry that had perfected the art of silence. The live broadcast continued, and in homes across the country, viewers suddenly found the gala's audio shift from the host's scripted banter to Keanu's calm, deliberate voice from backstage. Social media timelines lit up instantly. Hashtags like #KeanuSpeaks and #ProtectChildActors began trending within minutes. Viewers didn't know the full context yet, but they knew the tone. This was a man laying truth on the table without fear of consequences. Keanu, still unaware, continued as if speaking only to the small group around him. "When I was a kid starting out, I saw people get chewed up and spat out by this machine. They were told they weren't enough, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps they got. And the ones who dared to push back, they disappeared. No calls, no auditions, just gone." His eyes narrowed slightly, his focus sharpening on the stage beyond the curtain. "But here's the thing," You can only keep people quiet for so long. The truth always finds a mic, one way or another. A murmur rippled through the crew, some exchanging glances, others quietly nodding. By now, the clip was being ripped, re-uploaded, and shared faster than the control room could react. News outlets were tagging it, influencers were stitching it, and in the ballroom, people were starting to notice their phones buzzing non-stop. Somewhere out there, millions of strangers were hearing Keanu Reeves speak without a filter. And it was only a matter of time before the woman on stage realized she was no longer the center of the show. Inside the ballroom, the host stood under the spotlights, the picture of composure. Or at least that's what she thought. But from the back of the room, murmurs had begun to spread like ripples in still water. Guests in $1,000 dresses and tailored tuxedos were glancing down at their phones, frowning, then showing screens to the people next to them. The live stream had switched from her scripted jokes to Keanu's voice, and now the video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, each clip catching a different piece of his unflinching monologue. At first, she tried to plow through, raising her voice, laughing louder, hitting each punchline harder. But the room wasn't laughing anymore. Even the camera operators on the floor were exchanging looks, aware that whatever was happening backstage was more interesting than anything happening under the chandeliers. In the control booth above, the director was in full crisis mode. "Get the feed back. Get it back now," he barked. But the social media wildfire had already escaped containment. On a nearby monitor, a live viewer count ticked upward. Tens of thousands more people had tuned in since Keanu started speaking. Some were tuning in just to see what he'd say next. Others were joining because they'd already seen the clip and wanted confirmation it was real. Down on the ballroom floor, a few guests were even holding their phones up to record themselves reacting in real time, documenting the host's growing discomfort. The irony was thick. The event was meant to raise money for underprivileged children, but now the story dominating the night was about one of those children being humiliated by the very person leading the cause. The host finally caught on when she noticed a row of sponsors seated at the front table whispering urgently to one another, their faces tight with concern. She faltered mid-sentence, her voice catching on a word, then glanced toward the wings of the stage. From where she stood, she couldn't see Keanu clearly, but she could see people gathered around him, heads tilted in close listening. And in that instant, her smile froze. She realized something dangerous. The attention of the room, of the cameras, of the entire internet had shifted. She wasn't the main act anymore. Keanu was. And as the applause she had been expecting failed to arrive, replaced by an uneasy hush, she knew she was losing control of the evening. By the next morning, the Grand Avalon's glittering ballroom was empty, its tables stripped bare, the air thick with the ghost of last night's chaos. But outside, the storm was just beginning. Every major entertainment outlet had the same headline, worded in different flavors of shock. Keanu Reeves mic'd up backstage. Exposes gala host in viral clip. The video had crossed 50 million views overnight, flooding timelines with sound bites that ranged from soft-spoken compassion for the boy to pointed condemnation of Hollywood's treatment of young talent. Talk shows, podcasts, and news anchors debated it in real time, playing the audio over slow-motion shots of the host's stiff smile. The hashtag protect child actors wasn't just trending anymore. It was dominating the entire platform, a digital rallying cry with Keanu's face at the center. Sponsors reacted quickly, as they always did when the smell of scandal threatened their brand. By noon, 3 major backers of the gala released statements condemning the host's behavior, citing a breach of the event's values. One quietly announced they would be redirecting their donation to a children's advocacy group, the very one Keanu had supported for years without fanfare. Clips of the host's awkward closing remarks circulated too, her voice cracking as she tried to finish the night while audience members checked their phones instead of clapping. PR teams scrambled, lawyers made calls, and yet, nothing could put the genie back in the bottle. The footage was everywhere, being translated into multiple languages, stitched into fan edits, and reposted by celebrities who rarely commented on industry drama. The most powerful blow, however, came from the boy's family. That afternoon, the child actor's mother released a statement thanking Keanu for seeing her son as a person, not a prop. She described how, after the cameras went dark, Keanu had walked the boy out to the parking lot, knelt down and told him, "This job doesn't define you, you define it." That single sentence, paired with an image of Keanu holding the boy's hand under the dim glow of a streetlight, became the night's most shared post. The host's management issued a formal apology, but the public saw it for what it was: damage control. Within 48 hours, her upcoming projects were postponed indefinitely, her social media comments locked, and her name attached to the very scandal she thought she could outrun. Keanu never mentioned her again, but the silence itself was deafening. Next up would be Scene 6, where we close the arc with quiet justice, the boy's future hinted at, and Keanu delivering his final line that seals the story's emotional punch. The trial was held in the city's largest courthouse, its stone steps crowded with reporters, flashing cameras, and curious onlookers. The air inside buzzed with anticipation. Everyone knew this was more than just a case, it was a reckoning. Greg sat at the defense table, his expensive suit neatly pressed, his lawyer whispering last-minute strategies. Across from him, Sarah sat with her attorney, her posture calm but her eyes sharp, carrying the quiet power of someone who has endured and survived. The jury watched closely as the evidence unfolded. Documents proving years of fraudulent dealings, recorded conversations revealing threats, and witness after witness stepping forward to tell their own stories of Greg's deceit. Each testimony was a brick in the wall being built around him, and with every passing hour, that wall grew higher and more unscalable. Greg tried to hold his composure, but his mask was cracking. The charm that once manipulated people so easily now looked hollow. His confident smirks replaced with anxious jaw clenches. The prosecutor's closing argument was a masterclass in precision, each sentence hammering home that Greg's actions weren't just mistakes. They were deliberate, calculated acts that destroyed lives. Sarah's gaze never left him, not out of hate, but out of the unflinching need to witness justice being served. When the jury was sent to deliberate, the room held a tense silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. Hours later they returned, the foreman standing with a folded paper in hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." The words hung in the air like a church bell tolling, final and irreversible, as Greg was led away in handcuffs. His eyes darted to Sarah. He expected gloating, maybe even a smile of victory, but what he saw was far more devastating. She looked at him with a quiet, almost sorrowful strength, the look of someone who had reclaimed their life but felt no need to celebrate another's ruin. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted, some cheering, others simply relieved. Sarah stepped down the courthouse steps, the sunlight warm on her face, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. For the first time in years, her chest felt light, as though she had finally set down the weight she had been carrying. The world moved on around her, but she knew this moment would stay with her forever. Not because Greg had fallen, but because she had risen.